how is it to be a migrant and then moving to another country? And it took you several years to become aware of the topics that are burning issues in Slovenia, and to be strong enough to speak in public about it, and to be also invited by Slovenian media to comment different things. So I assume that there were ups and downs, and because this is project that is specifically targeting students with diverse backgrounds. We mean also first generation students and migrant students. We want to know what are the strategies, the challenges, the backdrops, how you move to another country and you keep your activism and your social engagement high. Because I would assume that at some point, as such an active person in Serbia, you moved to Slovenia and you probably felt as if your hands were tied, because, at least this is what it felt for me. I didn't know who is relevant, who is not, what's fake news, what's not, who is controlling which media. In your own country, you're born and grown to that information. So by the time you're 20, you know your landscape. But when you move to another country, you need to kind of go through all this data very fast, unless you want to drop down on your scale and be just a citizen that doesn't care about these things. Plus, I guess it's not really motivating that as a migrant with the residence, you can only vote on local elections and not on national. So you feel also, okay, but why would I vote if nothing will change? So can you reflect on those times when you first moved, how it felt for you, and then what were your strategies to become what you are now?
Well, honestly, I think if you're activist because of activism, because you believe in certain values, issues, you want to change something, if you have this inner drive, you will have it wherever you go. So when I came to Slovenia for personal, not really professional reasons, I wanted to get engaged because this is who I am. And I was very aware that because I was combining activism with my professional career, which was moving from NGO to more scientific research, but it always had this activist component this way or another. I realized, so I wanted to activistically engage in Slovenia because this is who I am, and then I turned it partly into my profession. This is what I've been doing in Serbia, so it continued in Slovenia. I remember that I was looking for jobs, but I was looking more for opportunities and sources of information. So when I, from social interaction with other people that I met through my boyfriend and his friends who were Slovenian, I realized that maybe the easiest way for me would be to try to make parallels to the system that I know from Serbia. So, for instance, we mentioned before that there was this radio B92 in Belgrade that was very important for political activism in the 90s and 2000s in Serbia. So basically, I looked for the similar type of radio in Slovenia. And I was basically asking people if something like this exists. I was telling them, like, this is how we do stuff, when they asked me, how it was to live under Milošević in Serbia, then I would, give them humoresque vignettes like the one I said before about listening to the radio and during the protests. And then I asked them, is there something like this in Slovenia? And then this is how I learned that this is Radio Student in Ljubljana. Then I started asking people, do you know somebody who knows somebody who works there? And this is how I learned that actually one of the friends that I already have I was acquainted with was actually working there. And then I asked her, this is something I would be interested in. Can you tell me more about it? And then she took me once to a meeting at the Radio Student, and she introduced me to the editor of the political program. And I said, I don't speak Slovenian. So you want to work at the media, but you don't speak the language. But I said, I feel that, this is where I want to be. So I realized that you have to, that people function within networks. And so I was trying to target these networks in the new society where I lived. And this is how then I started working for Radio Student, and this is where I met some of the key persons who were then important for my future, life and career in Slovenia. I Googled a lot. I Googled things like topics that I were interested in, and then I would add Slovenia or I would add Ljubljana in order to see whether there are events about these topics. So, for instance, I was interested in issues of, peace education, for instance, or transitional justice. And then I would write that in. I would look how it's written in Slovenian. Now you have Google Translate, which is easier. At that time, we had to use dictionaries. And then I would Google it, and I was just scrolling, through events. So, for instance, on Google, I would turn on, this limit, give me results only for the past year. So I would go through, open discussions, books, columns in newspaper, blogs, radio programs about these topics. And this is then how you learn, you see who are the people in this area. So who are the activists, which NGOs are being mentioned, which individuals are the opinion makers, which university programs are the programs where you can learn about this stuff, or where professors who are knowledgeable about these stuffs are teaching. So then I would literally do it as a field research, as anthropologists are, researching a new village. They come to a village and they want to learn how the village is working. So this is basically how I was doing it.
As a detective, or as my colleagues said, as a stalker.
As a stalker, yeah. So then I would learn, for instance, that there is, a public lecture on certain topic. Then I would go and sit down, and even if I didn't understand much, because I really didn't speak the language at the very beginning, I was, I was sitting down, I was looking, trying to understand what people were talking, writing down the names. Then somebody from the audience would say something smart. Then maybe I would approach this person and start talking to them. I would seize basically any kind of opportunity. And honestly, some of these people turned out to be very important for my later activism. And some of them I'm still meeting at the public debates, at television programs, and so on. So not much has changed in the 10 years that I'm here, meaning, still some people are, the same people are involved and active on certain types of issues. In this period, I invested a lot of time in learning the language. I think this is something you really need because if you want to get socially engaged. I think it is different in, let's say, in Ljubljana and in Berlin. I'm pretty sure that in Berlin you can be socially engaged even if you're not proficient in German. But still, invest enough time to understand the language and the vocabulary that is being used for certain type of issues. So if you are interested in climate change, then you should know how it's said in the language of the community you want to be active in. Then I was keeping it as a notebook, and I was going back through my notes. At certain point, I wanted to understand who are the big political parties, because I realized I was mixing the names of the two leading political parties. One of them was actually right-wing, one of them is left-wing. So I felt really stupid when during one conversation I mixed up SDS and SDP, which are really like oppositional parties at that moment, opposition to each other. So in order to avoid this, I made, a list of parties, how it's written in Slovenian, and then I translated it so I can understand what it means. And then I would ask people and write down information, or I would be reading newspaper and then I would find something relevant and I would write it down. So, for instance, Janez Janša doesn't like migrants, is, nationalistic. This is his history, was involved in independence of Slovenia. And I would, then every few days, or when I wanted to talk about this, I would basically go through my notes to remind myself. Because really, when you get to a new environment, all faces look same. So you have to catch up. It's basically like starting watching Friends from, season 4. You have to know what happened between Rachel and the guy,
Ross.
In season 1, in order to understand all, points of the plot in the season 4. So basically nowadays you have Wikipedia. At that time, 13 years ago, Wikipedia was not really reliable source of information. Now it's much more, at least for the basic information. So this is how it's important to know who are the key players. It's important to know the basic information, but really basic information about political system, in the sense, is it presidential or parliamentary? Where are the positions of real power? And then I think it's most important to recognize where are the circles of people that are like-minded like you. And then when you find them, it can be, NGO, it can be migrant community, it can be a squat, it can be an activist chorus, like the singing community. It can be a group of parents dedicated to certain issue. But when you find these people, then, engage with them. They might not necessarily be most open. Honestly, I was expecting more openness and I was disappointed on many occasions. But then, I was repeating to myself, they don't need you. You want to be part of their group. So try to adapt. And this is what I was doing. So I learned, that Metelkova is the place where, at that time, this kind of, this is where social events are happening that are attended by the people that I want to meet and I want to engage with. Then I recognized that Peace Institute is the NGO that is connected to the most of the topics that I'm interested in. So I started basically attending all the public lectures and publicly available events organized by Peace Institute. And sooner or later they learned who I am. And then at some point there was a job opening and I applied. And I was, first time I was not accepted. On the second occasion I was. But what I want to say is that I knew how, by the time I got to the job interview, I already had a clear picture what kind of organization they are and what I can bring to the table. This is a very good advice that a senior colleague of mine from Canadian Development Agency gave me when I was leaving my job and my job there in Belgrade, and I was leaving Serbia. And she told me, do a mapping of the civil society organizations. If you want to be engaged in civil society, do the mapping of civil society organizations in your country, in your town, and then cluster them by topics, and then pinpoint few of them that you would like to work with. And then write them an email or a job application, or when you communicate with them, informally on the events, think about what you can give them that they need. So don't think what you want or what would be your wishful thinking, what kind of activity you would like to be part of or you would like to initiate. Because at the beginning, you will have to participate in things that other people organize. You will probably not have resources to start something on your own as an immigrant without social network, without connections.